Gandy. Bruce, Canadian, based Nova Scotia, well-known piping figure North America and Scotland, won the gold medal both in Inverness and Oban, and we'll be hearing all about that. He's played in quite a few pipe bands with various experiences, but most of them, quite sure, very pleasant. He's a teacher. He's just had great news there in the last few days. He's had approval to set up a foundation. Now, he'll tell you about the foundation. The family tradition is carried on with Alec Gandy, his son, who just again last week won Pipe Idol, and we'll hear about Pipe Idol competition, and it's held during World's Week in Glasgow. And Alec, young Alec, is also a gold medal winner over in Canada. Enough of me, swap seats, and I'm going to hear from Bruce in a second or two. Okay. Okay, Bruce, you're enjoying your visit to Scotland. You've had a packed time in the last week or so with various solo piping competitions. And unusually, I'm just going to ask you for a quick synopsis even of the last week. What a week you've had, a tremendous week.
It's been a tremendous, physically exhausting, mentally challenging, emotionally successful week. 10 days straight of non-stop playing, 4 solo events, 2 band contests, 5 band practices, some solo piping in between, and supporting Alex as he went through the Pipe Idol contest, heat, and the finals as well. So, what else would you want to do?
So, yeah, you're very much current, you're at the top of your game, but you've been there for a while, and you're a household name. So, I think I'm going to drag you back, way back to the beginning, and we'll finish back with this week again, you know.
It's going to be a long way.
Yeah, where did it all start? I assume it was in Canada somewhere.
I grew up in Victoria, British Columbia on the west coast.
Okay.
My father was, excuse me, pipe major of the Canadian Scottish Regiment.
What's his name?
Ray Gandy.
Uh-huh.
And pipes were in the house, obviously, going all the time. So I heard, and I used to go down and listen to the band play all the time. It was terrific. I always liked it as a kid. And I started playing, I guess, when I was about 5 years old. Back then, we didn't use the methods that we use now, where it's a couple of notes and a grace note and a tune, or a song, and then an added doubling or two and a song, which you have to do now, and I agree with. But then it was technique, and you had to learn everything before you saw any kind of music as a tune. And I learned that, but the attention span just wasn't there as a 5-year-old.
It's difficult, isn't it?
So I think I packed it in for a year and a half. I maybe went 6 months, and then once I was about 7, Harold Senek came into the picture, and he got me started again, and spent about a year with me before he came to Scotland himself to spend time with the Muirhead and Sons band. And at that point, Jamie Troy took over as an 8-year-old and started to work with me. And he's not only a teacher and still the biggest influence on my career, but very much a father figure too.
Where did Jimmy get his stuff from?
He got a lot of his stuff from a man named Ian Duncan in Victoria, and I can't remember who Ian was taught by. A few people from Vancouver, and a lot of tuition via Bob Hardy, Andrew Wright, and Donald McLeod.
Okay.
And Jamie's just been a wealth of knowledge,
Yeah.
and still continues to be a source for me.
It always amazed me how all these guys kept these tunes current in their head, and they always remembered exactly how a peever should be played and everything else. Do you have any sort of notion about, say, that? Are they keeping the correct tune in their head, or are their memories fading and they're putting their own interpretation on it? How do they keep this knowledge?
I believe that there's enough of a core of the people that when any of the top players, so we don't throw names out, but if a top player does start to fade in the memory, that there's enough that are playing in the style that they used to play in.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've got recordings of players playing, and it's quite different from how it was 10 years previous. And I'm sure my own recordings, I keep a log of as many of my recordings as possible. And they do change in time with maturity and your feeling of the music and just your knowledge of the music. That's evolution. I think it's right. In a nutshell, without getting into the real thick of it, everybody today is so much busier with their life than they used to be. That's just a plain fact. And with the electronic age, preserving stuff is easier. But I think in my own personal view, in say the 30s, people went to work, but from the best of my knowledge, generally got to leave their job at work and could spend their nights singing Pipers'Persuasion and talking with their friends over a tune and a drink or a tune and a cup of tea. And it stayed pretty good.
So
nowadays,
it's still quite wholesome, the whole
yes,
thing.
and nowadays you need to have this preservation of the music so you can refer to it, because you're grinding out more and more and more, and you're trying to get 27, 28 hours out of a 24-hour day now.
Yeah.
Right across Scotland, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, human life is just busier than it really should be.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that makes it tough to preserve that. But how these guys did that through Cantarac, and I mean, Cantarac is great, and there's depth within the language of singing the tunes, but the length of time is not really descriptive on that piece of paper.
No.
So there's got to be, there's got to be a method of preserving the phrasing. And
Yeah.
we have that now with recordings.
Yes.
And you can try and mimic Bob Brown, John McDougall, Bob Hardy, anyone.
Yeah.
Or you can take that and then add your own stamp on.
It's amazing. I was speaking to Alexis Minier, who's won several Peever prizes in the last year. And I spoke to him last year and I said to him, "Who taught you?" I said, "Nobody." I've just listened to recordings. And that's the way a lot of guys are going now. And I'm quite sure you've got a comment on that. Eh?
That's a twofold issue.
Yeah.
One, it's a tremendous advantage that allows us to produce a huge number of quality players. What it doesn't do is bring several of those the ability to become top quality players, because they've memorized a system of digits, for lack of better words, and they're trying to play it that way. And the competitive scene is often where you've got to just stay the course properly. And if you can play that as close to what you know the judge who was taught by John McDougall Gillis or John MacDonald, for the sort of, let's put the two direct lines in there. And I know that they go down that road, and you want to play it just as close to what they do, you got a better chance of winning. It's a fact of life because of the honest bias that people have. And it's one of the things that when I talk about Pipers'Persuasion playing at home, I'll teach kids to play one way, very much a do as I say, not as I do. And say, for the reason that they need that grounding, they have to understand how to be on first base at home,
Yeah.
play the tune this way, strong here, weak here. And when you really, really get that, and you've had some success, then you've got a right to add your own poetic license. You know, it's one of the things that kind of irks me, and I don't comment on sites anymore with people who, you know, they get all high and mighty about the MacArthur setting of this tune or this old setting of that tune. And some of these people I've seen play and judged them, and I want to just say, why don't you just learn 10 Pipers'Persuasion down the middle first?
Yeah.
So you really know how to play. Then you can decide how to branch out. They've branched out into something else that they don't know how to apply that to the next tune. You know, so you need a...
That's a very interesting path we've taken in the last few minutes, and I broke my own rules because I was trying to build up a wee personal history of you as a youngster, and I'm going to have to drag you back there, sorry. So you described your early tuition, your learning from others there. When did you start competing, and did they teach all your peers like music and that sort of stuff?
I started competing shortly after I got going in what we call round 2, the one that's still continuing. And local games, local Highland games, we had our little circuit in British Columbia, and I was very, very fortunate at one point, I think about a year and a half into starting the second time, my family and Jamie Troy sensed that it was just not doing it for me. Playing pipes growing up in Victoria did not make me the most popular person. It was something I actually tried to hide because it wasn't a cool thing. And I also was a big fan of hanging with my friends, playing street hockey, or more importantly, I wanted to be on the golf course. They sensed that, and there was a great piping school in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, started by Colonel John McEwing in 1968, I believe. And they, first year, I think, brought out Seamus McNeil, if I'm correct. But after that, it was Bob Hardy and Andrew Wright. They convinced them to scholarship me in, and Jamie and Harold Senek were back and said, hopefully with the prize money we can win at the Seattle games, get Bruce on a plane from Victoria to Seattle. My family didn't have much money.
Okay.
We'll look after him, pin a note to his chest to say he's allowed to go in the United States and be under his guardianship. And away I went down to the school and met, you know, these huge piping figures who made a little extra special effort that took me years to realize that they took Bruce aside to help me with this, or 5 minutes on that bit of a tune. Come by, if they saw me, they'd take a minute and stop and tune my pipes for me. Brought me into the senior class. That was actually half a babysitting chore as well, so that Jamie and Harold could keep an eye on me as a, you know, a reckless 10-year-old. And but that was the last I ever said of I didn't want to play anymore. I met so many people there, and apart from that school of learning, there was a carnival there, and lots of young people that were in the bands in Vancouver, etc. And locally that are still great friends of mine. So we had a lot of fun while we were there. A key component. So it was like a summer holiday, but during the day I was learning piping, and I'm still very close to those people that were in that senior class with me, instructors.
Did you go to quite a few of these schools, summer schools, whatever, following on from that?
I went to Coeur d'Alene, I think, all through the 70s, and eventually wound up teaching there as well. So I spent probably six or seven summers. I was down for 1 or 2, or I think a couple times I had 3-week schools, and a tremendous source of tuition from, it was mostly Andrew Wright after that, and then Evan McRae came a few times, and I learned a terrific amount from him as well.
So, in all the time you're developing and you're competing in North America initially. Successful?
Yes, through the grades, I had a good run of success. I was lucky. I was well instructed. I worked reasonably hard, but I wasn't as dedicated as I should be. Obviously, I guess I'm blessed with good teaching in good hands at that time, which got me through a lot of competitions.
What sort of practice were you doing as a youngster?
As little as I could.
Aye.
To be honest, I enjoyed playing when I was with a group, but I remember going, oh, geez, I did to practice, and it was cane reeds, and you're trying to figure out how to work with them, and you know, I remember days sneaking off and road hockey games on, and I'm supposed to be practicing, and the pipes aren't going well, and I'd give one shot at trying to fix the tenor reed or something, and just tell my mom, I need to sort that out tonight. I have to call Jamie because I don't know how to fix it. Half because I didn't know, and half because it was a good enough excuse that I just really didn't know how to fix it. So, but I learned from listening from a young age very well, and I've always done that. I've never, ever been a good reader of a manual. I still not to this day, to the point that I would almost call it a learning disability. So I read from here.
At what point did you have a wee bit personal discipline installed? Did pipe bands have to do that for you? Well,
I think I was always very disciplined with the pipe band. Jamie Troy demanded that in the band.
That's what,
and he taught us.
Some guys, it takes a band to force you to get the instrument up scratch and practice indeed, you know.
I enjoyed going out and playing in the solos and stuff, but practicing, what a pain, you know. You had better things to do. The band practice was generally fun because you're with a group of guys. And in the 70s, I mean, you played in bands at that time, Alan. They weren't nice, positive, forward motion groups all the time. If it wasn't good enough, you're getting your head to play with. And, you know, I try to tell people in my groups nowadays, you know, when they think I'm giving them a rough time in band, and it's not that I should be giving them the time that I used to have, but it was nasty business back then. And if you weren't performing, your pipe wasn't right, you weren't focused, it was a tough go. You just got pounded down, and it demanded that you got it better because we didn't have enough people for you to not be performing. So I learned a tremendous amount.
The discipline of learning the tunes off by heart.
And you knew those tunes. You were scared to make a mistake.
Yeah.
You know, the end of it, I'm not screwing this up for the band because, you know, we're going to have to play it again. We'll play it again. And band practice in Victoria would start at 7 o'clock. And it might go to 9:30 or 10. And if we're getting ready for a contest, it might go to 11, 11:30.
What band was that?
The City of Victoria Pipe Band.
Okay.
And we had a junior band in town at the time, and I only played sort of in one event with them. And then it kind of folded, because I was just a little kid in that group, and the other guys were about 16, 17, and some of them moved away, and I just remember the band kind of falling apart, and there was no more junior band. Jamie always taught me, so he picked me up and started bringing me along to the senior band. You know, oh, it'll be a good experience for him. I mean, I was just 11 at that time, learning a lot of these tunes, but eventually fit my way into the band as a 12-year-old, which I'm very proud of now. And, you know, on the field with a grade 1 band at that age. Had I known how scary it was in today's mind, thinking there's no chance I could have done it.
Exactly. Another wee thought occurred there that a lot of what we call kitchen piping started up in Canada and what have you. Were you involved in that? Did that motivate you to practice to some extent?
You know what, it did. It did because it put a non-competitive, non-hardcore band spin on having a good time.
Yeah.
And
I can imagine that appealed to you, actually.
You know, and it did. I mean, I liked it.
Yeah.
I mean, the term kitchen piping really, really, that's a world piping anchor around Scott McCauley and Neil Dickey. They invented the term, they are that term. And it was guys who did basically what the Cayleys at Inverness used to be, although the Cayleys at Inverness, as I remember, were semi-structured.
Yeah.
Here it was just at a party or a Cayley, get the pipes out, let's go. And people started to, it never really became competitive, but you wanted to come up with something new for the next week. So you were looking at tunes and looking at ways of arranging tunes, and that's, what it also helped get me composing more, thinking about musical arrangements and
so
what...
That made you practice?
That made you practice.
That and the band?
Yeah, and people that, I don't want to use the term in the wrong way, but the old guard, they get on about the kitchen piping and it's just terrible for you. They are so 100% wrong. It's developed so many players, as long as you can harness that discipline of what they're doing there. And I'll go and, we have a Pipers Club at home now, and we get these kids to play. My son Alex makes them play.
Right.
If it's one jig or their 2-4 march to Siege of Delhi, get up and play.
Yeah.
Just play it. And I'm going to encourage you, and everyone's going to tell you it's great because you're doing it. And at the end, I might just say one little thing about it. Just remember that next time. All that stuff because you're in an easier atmosphere.
That's what the bagpipes there for, to enjoy.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you've got that going on, so, and you mentioned the word composing. What was it? Was that the impetus for the composing, or had you always been composing?
I always tried to. The first tune that I ever composed, I have a handwritten copy of it somewhere. It's not much of a hornpipe, but it followed the basic theory of an A phrase, B phrase, A phrase, finish phrase, new part, B phrase. And I wrote it as a present to my parents for their 25th anniversary, because I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together to buy anything, or a card, and I thought, well, I'll compose something. And Colin McGee at that time was in the band in Victoria and writing tunes all the time, because he was a prolific composer, and still is. And I thought, this is neat. And I'd come up with ideas and try and, almost like doing crossword puzzles for me. I'd come up with, here's an idea, now what works with it. I never really studied classical theory right, but I understood quite a lot of how the phrases link together and how the keys on the pipes link together. Here's a high hand, here's a low hand, in its broadest terms.
Yes.
A major and a minor, how it started finding stuff in just different kind of arpeggios, and I went, well, this is kind of cool if I can make that work. And then thinking, my first thoughts being, well, this tune would go really good here in a medley.
Yeah.
And Jamie, I think, had picked one out, I can't remember, and said, yeah, that's a great idea. And I thought, well, here's a reason to start thinking about this now. So it went from there and it exploded.
So, your hornpipes, do you do all the time signatures, or have you done all the time signatures over the years?
I've written in, yes, including some that are obscure, in 10/8 and 11/8 and things like that.
17/21 and
crazy rhythmical things, but no, the 3/4s, the 4/4s, small 2/4 marches, competition marches, strass bays, competition strass bays, small reels, big reels, jigs, hornpipes, 4 or 5 Pibrics.
I'll come back to Piers in a second. What was the sort of your most successful tune, or is that wrong to say that? You've got a lot of successful tunes out there, but the one that you really sort of...
That's
is that a
depends on how you score it. I've had some that were a real challenge that I wanted to compose for a certain reason. There's some that I think there's probably a few tunes I wrote in the Frasers that I can remember how good it linked something in the medley together. So personally, it was a huge success. I've had a good few tunes that I look at in the program in the World Pipe Band Championships, and I see coming up year after year, and a royalty statement shows me that. So it depends on how you measure the success.
Yeah.
If it's been played by 37 bands, a total of 64 times at the World Pipe Band Championship. That's your most successful tune. That's fine, but that might not be the tune with the most depth.
So how many books have you got out?
Currently, I've got 4 books out.
And a fifth one on the road.
All of those books have at least 50% of the tunes composed by me. And I chose in around that area because I wanted to distribute music of other players as well. I thought it was important for people, especially when I got into the second and third and fourth book, that when there was good composers out there that maybe didn't have enough to compile a book, or saying it in a way I don't really like, a name that could distribute that book. If I could help them out and have it in my book, then that was great. And plus I felt from an actual sale of the book and the variety was important. I could produce a book of tunes that was 100% Bruce Gandy compositions with all the time signatures covered, but it still seemed to me that it might all be of one style, my general style of writing, and I thought it might lose the appeal to some people. So I've always, but the more I get into it...
So you got a different colour running through the book all the time, rather than just all the same colours.
That's right, and colour would be a great word, I think, you know, to describe that.
And your paper says, how did you do that?
It mostly started, to be honest, I wrote a lot of slow airs and quite a few Piers singing to my son at night. Just to get him to sleep, because I couldn't sing lullabies like normal parents and stuff, and I just would sing, you know, Gaelic songs that I knew, and I would start to just go off on my own, and quite often come out of the room at night going, I think I got something. Great. You know, I was humming away to Alex here, and Piers as well. Just, it was a soothing method. Alex always liked it as a baby. He just sat, and that was how we got him to sleep. Just...
I spoke to various people, Jimmy Walk, Angus Laurie, about composing, and both said that they got an idea and they had to write it down immediately or it was lost. Have you had that same experience? Often.
I do sit down, excuse me, I sit down at times and try to compose, and it doesn't always work. I would say probably 90% of the time when I start to compose something that I'm actually aiming for, it comes out as something else, a complete different time signature. If I'm looking for a jig, I get playing some things and then I immediately switch time signatures and like, you know what, that's a march actually. I should be doing that.
Works better,
I've done a lot of commission tunes, and apart from tunes that are, you know, that have been commissioned to write, which has actually become a part of my business now, they take a while. I get as much information about the person and the feeling of that person and what their personality is and what this tune is meant to represent. You know, is this a happy little tune for someone's, because this guy's in the band and he's jovial, or is this a stately tune for some man's wife's 50th birthday, or is this a lament for someone's mother or grandmother, you know, for a broad range of topics. And I try to get into that and try and get a feeling for what would sound nice, and then I start to kind of go to work. Difficult.
It's very, very difficult for those of us who have never composed anything. I just can't begin to manage the mindset that you've got to climb into before you start these labours of composing tunes. Angus MacDonald, for instance, he was given a task many a time in the army by a senior officer, compose a tune for some general, whatever, you know, the next morning, and we sit up and just sit behind a dike somewhere and try and get into that frame of mind. It's almost too difficult.
It is very difficult to do it on the spot.
Yeah.
And you don't always come up with the quality that you're looking for. I have a screener, don't need to tell you who, very good friend, very academic, Piper. Nothing that I write, not a note that I write, goes anywhere near any public before he's seen it and heard an MP3 of what I think it's supposed to sound like, and the music's written to him, and he can look through it and comment back, this is a good tune, I'm not so sure this is one of your best. It sounds like, which is the biggest fear. You know, is it any good?
Yeah.
Is it going to work? Does it have an idiom that we're looking for? Does it sound like it's my own? That's the most important thing, because you just don't want to go out and realize that, you know, you tried to write some nice tune and you're so wound up not realizing that you just wrote Jeannie Carruthers again.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's not right, and it's embarrassing. And unfortunately, there's a fair chunk of that
there
goes
is
on.
a tremendous amount.
And it's actually easy. I have to think that these composed tunes didn't come on purpose. These people just didn't know, and if they just thought to get some people with knowledge to screen them,
Yeah.
you know, then you could say, yeah, that's a good tune, it's original, you know, it's not my cup of tea, but it works musically, I think it's a fine tune.
Well, we the viewers are just hoping that there's there weren't any tunes binned by your screener that would be very successful tunes.
There's been a lot banned, I can tell you that. And tunes that, one of the issues I find when I'm trying really hard to write a tune is that when you go through phrase patterns for half an hour, almost anything can start to make sense because those notes are in your head now, you know, and you play it, and that's where a lot of composers that I've talked to will say, I write down something, I've got it, and then I'm going to put it away for a few weeks, and then I'm going to come back to it. And I've done that with little pieces, and then come back and go, no, that really is garbage, out.
It's amazing what a night's sleep does to a composition.
Yeah.
If it survives that, then it's doing quite well, I suppose, eh?
Yeah, and I've got bits of them written all over the place, singing tunes when I used to take the car into work, or when I used to ride the subway into work.
Yeah.
You know, the most treasured piece of music I have, I've lost. And that was actually the tune I wrote called Waiting for Alexander. When I was working downtown in Toronto, I got called because it was time to go to the hospital. And I purposely had gone on the subway because that's the easiest and quickest way home if there's a traffic problem, and I don't want that kind of hassle when I'm about to go and be a dad. And I humming and whistling away, and I had this tune started to come to my head as I'm trying to breathe and relax and, you know, go through all the panic of it, being a new dad. And I wrote it on the back of a cigarette pack. I tore my cigarette pack open, and I had to write this tune down because I knew it was a good tune, and I could feel it coming out. And all the way home, I was waiting for Alexander. I had it forever and ever, and the last time I moved, I lost it. And I thought, it's like, oh God, the original. And it's so politically incorrect too, because it's on the back of a cigarette pack and everything. But that's where they go, and I've got bits.
At least you've got it. You've still got it recorded somewhere. But no,
yeah,
if you've lost the cigarette packet.
Yeah, oh no, it's recorded and it's in the books and stuff. But just kind of having the original scrap was something I really
I thought you were going to
cherished.
tell us for a couple of minutes there that it had been lost immediately after it was
Oh
composed or
no,
something.
the tune's still out, and it made it. It survived.
Right, you competed in North America, tradition there. You slipped in the word Toronto a minute ago, so let's talk about geography for a second, and a second only. You've moved from West Coast when to where?
I moved very quickly. I moved in 1982. I was 19, at a loss for my way, for lack of terms, and I moved to Toronto.
Okay.
At that time, I had met a lady who eventually and still is my wife. I had an opportunity at a job, just being a laborer on a construction site through her father, who was a foreman. It was something I was interested in anyway, and eventually served my apprenticeship as a joiner through the family and the company.
Okay.
And we stayed there until 1997, 15 years,
Terrific, eh?
and then moved to the East Coast.
Why do you move from the good weather over to the cold, wet?
I haven't a clue.
Nova Scotia. Eh?
I haven't a clue. Well, you know what? Weather-wise, I still think about that constantly. I have a really, really hard time with it. But life brings you different obstacles to deal with. In 1997, you know, a physical issue developed within me, dictated that I needed a change of pace and a lifestyle change immediately, a heart condition. And an opportunity came up to teach piping, which was something I was doing quite a lot of, and trying to figure out how to move from being a carpenter to a full-time piper and balance. I was running a business on my own, and I wanted to swing to piping just because of hands and injuries, and that's a whole different topic. We don't need to go down, really.
Okay.
But the lifestyle change came up, and the opportunity to become teaching full-time came up, and so we took it.
Before we leave Toronto, we've got to cover 78 Fraser Highlanders, haven't we?
That's a pretty huge part of my life, maybe the biggest.
So tell us a wee bit.
I came in late October 1982, and just spent a few months getting acclimatized to the area and having a hard time committing to joining the band. I mean, at that time, and I still don't believe in the whole band hopping thing, but it was like, no, I'm not sure. I'm going to make sure I'm going to stay here before I really sever my roots with the city of Victoria. But by the January, February, March, somewhere in there, I hooked up with the band, and Bill Livingston, Michael Gray, a close friend of mine, and several people in the band who remain my wife and I, best friends. And just, I came to that band at a time that the pipe band world was about ready to be changed, and we were the ones who were going to change it. And I have no problem with saying that the group in the 78th Frasers, with Livingston's will to succeed and the players he had who had composing ability and our vision to change the world, we did.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Absolutely.
And it was a great time in life because we had such a strong group of players as well, and it was a group that I just never heard this before. And you know, ideas were coming out, and we were taking ideas from other music that nobody ever had the guts to use. I mean, there was lots of great Irish stuff going on, and so we just started throwing out medleys, and people were going, "Holy, what is that?"
Exactly.
And decided we needed to do more than that. We were going to come. We knew we could come and win a world championship at some point, but we needed to do something bigger to let people know that the music has to be more than just a medley, and that's really where the concert scene evolved, which the band started as well.
I have the notion that you're probably, 78 Fraser Highlanders is probably the best known concert, probably the most successful concert band the world has known. Other bands, top bands have done concerts, but 78 seem to almost specialise in them, apart from, we'll come back to the World Championship in a second or two, but they produce wonderful music. That was my overall understanding. The music, the great tunes and the settings of the tunes, and the drive there.
Mm-hmm. I agree. One, I would agree in bias. I was a part of that. But two, the bias comes from the belief that the ideas were there. The band was never ever afraid to stretch the walls of the house or the envelope. Mm-hmm. And admittedly, we went too far a few times. Who cares?
Yeah.
You have to go there to find out where you can get to. And wonderful settings of tunes and coming up with, I think our band's credit was coming up with themes for each track
Yeah.
you know, of the concert. Like, we're not just going to play 4 jigs. That's boring. What are we going to do? How are we going to use the keys to work with us? How are we going to use movement on the stage? Are we going to use dancers or not, or different instruments to create
Wonderful
movement
presentation,
and color?
Yeah.
So that it was more than just the circle at the competition.
It was a show.
It was a show.
What would you reckon was the best sort of format, or the best show that you put on? I've got a notion about Flame of Wrath, but maybe you've got a different notion.
The Flame of Wrath, I never got on the stage with that show. I got all the way to 3 weeks before, and that was in 1997 when I moved to the East Coast.
Okay.
So I helped a lot in developing that show.
Probably
But
better
for
shows,
me,
it's just one minute.
We've had some good shows there. Nothing, nothing even comes close in my mind than playing live in Ballymena in 1987. That was a night that changed the world of piping forever. And alone at that should stand as why it's the greatest show we've ever done. And I think still the greatest show in pipe band history. Some might be flashier, some might have had maybe slighter, tighter playing, but that night, the official concert of playing all different idioms and structures of music and different links together was invented. And plus we went out, we rehearsed, and we were going to Ireland. And I remember walking out onto that stage that night. There's something 700 people there or something, as much as the place could hold. And the front 2 rows were absolutely jam-packed with a who's who in piping. And I thought, oh my God, what are we up for? And I hope we do it right. And just the way the acoustics were, we played 3 or 4 cuts and then stepped off. And I thought, oh no, this is bombing. You know, we're not getting anywhere. But thankfully Lillian came backstage and I with Bill, and I said, what's going on, Lil? Like oh no, they're not biting. These are the Irish people, we thought. And she goes, no, they're going absolutely wild out there. But the way that the sound was coming through the ceiling, we weren't getting the applause and the screaming on the stage.
Yeah.
And most of the front couple rows.
It's actually a funny hall, that.
Yeah, most of the front couple rows were McAllister's and McClellans and pipe majors and stuff going. They came over at an interest, which is really, you look back and go, it's a mark of respect, because they heard the hype and they thought, we better go see what these guys from Canada are up to.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it was just, it makes me smile every time to think of that night. You know, again, it was just forever.
And you went on, was the following year that you won the Worlds?
No, 2-3 days later.
I was thinking 88, 87?
87.
87.
Pulled over the next day, a couple practices. Fortunate enough to draw last on that day.
Yeah.
Boom. Everything was falling into place the way it's supposed to, and we were able to deliver.
And that's, you broke through the barrier of the Strathclyde Police winning it since 1980.
Yeah.
And you just took the feet away from them, and that was it. You
Yeah,
captured it.
so there's
that
6
day.
in a row. Could have been, I think, 9 in a row.
Wow,
I think they had 2 more after us.
So it's your fault.
Yeah, and I'm happy to take credit for that. Very happy to take credit for that.
Excellent. The band was going really well then. Why did they never win it a second time, do you think?
I could speak in a couple of tongues on that and say I believe we should have won it a second time.
Okay.
But that's not on the day, that's not on the field. I wasn't with the pen. Honestly, I have no idea why the band didn't win it a second time. I don't think, well, in terms of how I often teach people, I would say the band didn't lose another 3 or 4 times. They just happened to get beat. by better bands. And then there were times where we beat ourselves.
It's a tough game up there, isn't it?
Well, the secret is that you don't lose. I mean, that's been the backbone of my teaching of all my students. You just don't go out there and lose. When you lay down your stuff, whether it's a band, and you don't leave any doors open, you've done your business. If someone comes by as a soloist or a band, and they happen to beat you, fair's fair.
You've done your best.
And you go and look and just start to dissect what happened. What can I do now as a band or soloist?
Last word, and that's where I'm going. The soloist work. Scotland, solo piping. You come across here, you won both gold medals. When?
Inverness, I won the gold medal on my 36th trip. It's important that people know how much either dedication or lunacy goes into this.
Okay.
In 2002. And
What's the tune?
The Road of Glenfruin.
Do you like that tune?
I do.
Have you played it since?
A couple times. Not a lot because it wasn't such a popular tune. But every time I go back to it, I kind of wonder why I don't play it so much. It's good and strong.
Okay.
And then I was fortunate to win the next gold medal, which was the following August.
Okay.
Which I was quite happy. They were calling it the Tiger Double for a while at Oban in 2003, playing Battle of Passagreef.
That's a good one too.
And that still remains a big favorite of mine.
Yeah.
I play it.
I think it's so difficult because it's a simple tune.
That's a great story, which I could segue into. When I played at Oban that year, and Bill Livingston taught me that tune, and we always talked about structure and building that tune and pace to make it work because it's so simple. And one of the most difficult things in that tune that you have to do is mentally check off each line.
Yeah.
Because it's an A-A-B, A-B-B, A-B phrase pattern and go through. And there was a part in the second in the Torlith somewhere that I completely lost my place. And I instinctively played, which you generally do.
Yeah.
But I was into like the third line. I thought.
But it's motor memory carried you through there.
Yeah, and I thought I'd have no idea whether I did this, you know. And I thought, okay, forget it. Played, and I played, and I felt really good. My pipes were really good. My hands were going well, and I burned on through the Cronlith and the Mac and finished off. But I sheepishly walked up the aisle after and stopped to ask Colin McClellan because I thought I'm either long gone out or I've got a good shot here. And he said, did I play this correctly? Because I don't remember line 2 in the Torlo singling. I think that was the spot. And he said, no, it was absolutely fine. Jenny was following in the book. And I kind of walked out after and went, okay, now at least we'll see what they did, because I wasn't sure if I'd just lost myself instead of gotten beaten, which I would have been furious of.
I'm quite sure Brett would have something to say in the psychology of that one, eh?
Well, yeah, and I mean, we both study that quite a bit. I've read and studied with sports psychologists quite a bit on dealing with memory and stress and physical pain due to hand injuries that I've suffered and neck injuries that I still, up to last week, was here to see someone getting me fixed up again to work with my hands and neck. And I have to survive as a piper, and I have to see these people or my hands won't work. And envisioning what you're doing and the psychology of preparation, practice, the will, knowing exactly where you are in any given situation and how to get around an error and keep plowing through.
How do you get around an error and plow through that?
I've convinced myself that an error, you can either stop and be last place immediately, or you can go through to the end and see what happens. Sometimes you make an error that you didn't actually make. You think you made it.
Aye.
And so you have to go, I've started this tune and I'm going to finish. And if I make an error, I mean, stuff happens. Occasionally you do, whether it's the tiniest of grace notes to a doubling to a note wrong. You go through and it's done. And the thing that you can convince yourself of, and you have to look into the mirror and just go, when you've made an error, you can't fix it. You can carry on and play for the people and the performance aspect and see what happens. You cannot fix what you've done. So there's no sense in worrying about it.
No sense in stopping.
No sense in worrying about it. You know, if you start worrying about something coming up, oh geez, that fourth part's been giving me trouble.
It's
You
going
might
to
as well
give you
pack it
trouble.
in. You've had it.
Yeah.
You're done. You'd have to know that you've played that. I envision a lot, and when I get any kind of nervousness going on, I've become really good, and I'm really thankful to say to myself in the performance, and I'll be playing, I'll say, go to your kitchen, go to your kitchen. And I can visually see my kitchen at home in Halifax, in Dartmouth, Halifax. Sometimes with people sitting there or another, and I can walk right through playing a tune, and lights are on, nobody's home, and I'm away in another place. And it takes a long time to develop that, but I work at it every week. And if I'm at home, I try to wrap myself up into a complete frenzy. I'll play and say, okay, now, here we are, former winners MSR Inverness.
So you're on the platform.
I've got
and you're
15
in
minutes
pitch,
to get ready, what am I going to do? And I'll look at the clock on the stove,
Aye.
you know, and it's whatever time it is. Okay, I've got 15 minutes. And I do everything, but I don't dress rehearse. That would probably help too. I'm just lazy, don't want to. But I do everything else that I would prep for. I make sure I got a glass of water beside me, my towels beside me. I go, I think 5 minutes, okay, and I try and picture, okay, there's a steward coming in to say he's into the reels. And you can mentally get yourself wrapped up into a real state. And I've had it where my family's come in to the house, bags of shopping, not even see them come in, because you can get yourself into that zone. And all I see is the stage at Eden Court Theatre. And when I start tuning up for that 3 or 4 minutes, I'm looking and I picture a panel that I've seen up there, or invent, you know, recognizable faces up there. And I'll see Ian McClellan and John McDougall and Ian Morrison or whoever I choose that day, and I'll look that way and I went, where are they? Okay, I can see that table, and I can see the tartan over the table, and I see the floor here, and you can really do that, and it's tremendous for your playing, because then you're total focus, and if I remember, I'll record it as well and see what happened, because what I think is going on in my kitchen is almost 180 degrees different than what is actually going on, and I'll go, my God, I do not realize I was going that slow, that quick, that clipped, that open.
Somebody used the word surprise a wee while ago. I tried it a couple of times. I found it frightening when I played it back.
It is, and one of the things you have to look at when you're studying this stuff, I tell all my students, record your stuff when you can.
Yeah.
Don't do it every day.
No.
Because you won't see the improvement. And I tell them, never listen to it the day you played it. Listen to it the next day. Because your mind's still telling you, this is how it went, because this is what I think went on. And people that'll listen to it right after, I'm like, you know, your heart rate's still going at 95 beats a minute. You've been playing for an hour. You've got to and then come at it the next day and say, okay, now let's go see how this goes. Here's the student A going to play. What do I think of this? And you can start looking at it from for me, I can look at it from an outside view. Everybody that I know that records the first few times, they just go, oh, this is awful, this is terrible, oh, I shouldn't do this is crap, I'm too fast. They got to find what's right in it to build off of. You know, because piping's such a game of small things, you know, I missed a doubling and I squawked on the burl. I'm nowhere near ready for Saturday. And I'm like, you know, you played about 640 notes, bang on the money. If you could just fix these 2 little bits, this is going to be a good tune.
Yeah.
Stop worrying. That just lets you know where to fix it, not that you're not a good player.
Right. Where do you go with a careful 2/4, or do you go for it and just play up tempo?
That depends on the venue, the judges, my physical and mental state of being, and what I'm trying to accomplish there. I will go places where I know I have warmth and control and a panel that will accept that, and I'll go and try and lay down the business in a spirited, happy way, and I'll have other panels just from experience and knowledge or fear that I'm going to try and play a little more careful, or I'm going to do things. And I'll also look to some judges and try and control myself to things I know they've been looking for in the past, as long as it doesn't break my own musical rules. You know, people play for a judge sometimes. Yeah. In a sentence, go ahead. Yeah. People say, I would never play for the judge. I'm like, it's a competition. You do what you do to win. If it doesn't bend your personal feeling. You know, if
you've got boundaries there, and you just adjust.
If you're not doing something that's upsetting your musical feeling of something, then you're there to win. I'm out to have a good tune. BS. You're not there. You're there to win the contest. Otherwise, you shouldn't be in the contest. And hopefully, it involves having a good time and a nice tune. But if you don't have a good competitive instinct, Willie, Roddy, Gordon, Angus, Alistair, Pipe Major Angus, Ian Morrison, they're all out to have a good tune, but when they're in the final tuning room, there is nothing on their mind more than playing through that on an exceptional performance on something that people are going to go, that was unbelievable, and nothing is getting past them. And that's what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's what actually makes the performance fun. It's because you've achieved a goal. You know, and you've raised your level. It's not just I tuned the pipes up and had a nice play. That's what we do when we're sitting around like this having a beer and firing out some tunes. You know, but when in the contest, you want it to be...
It's a focused event.
It's a focused event. It's got to be letter perfect. Yeah. And then it's going to have a bit of that. Okay,
for the young guys who are aspiring, even pipe bands, harking back there for a second, how do you get them into the proper frame of mind? They're on the line, and the two rolls, they've got to put pipes up and they've got to hit that E. They're worried about double toning bass drones or whatever. How do they overcome that first hurdle of actually raising the pipes on the shoulder, getting everything timed perfectly and starting the tune, and also controlling the blowing and get the blowing correct, but not hitting the bag too hard, all these sort of things? Where do you go with that?
Experience. Belief that you know how to do it. Positive rehearsal. You cannot go to the line at the Worlds or the games at Auchterarder or Halifax or the local county games and think of it any different than the band hall. It's the same thing. There's just people watching you this time. And when people get a big head on, they're not going to be able to manage it. And that's why these misses. If you had any suspect of a double tone, I know someone that played in the field marshal had a double toning drone the day before the Worlds a couple years ago. They changed their bass read, which is the obviously first thing you got to do, and they went home and did over 300 starts that evening.
Goodness sake.
But if you're going to be the best in the world, which they were that next day, that's what it takes. Because there was no way that person was going to go with even a shadow of a doubt. And practicing hitting it with a full bag, with not quite so full a bag, I stumbled, I coughed. Anyway, there was a multitude of ways that 1, 2, and 3 was going to work. And you've got to just constantly understand it. Listen to the pipe major, listen to the rolls. It's a rhythmical motion. Boom, up, down. You can't go, why would you whack it so hard. I don't quite understand that. I could see not hitting it hard enough because you're just a bit timid.
Yeah.
But why would you hit it so hard? And you can get away with not hitting it hard enough and just get up to E. I've seen a lot of times where people didn't sound the E, but they're in position and it's fine. It's rehearsal, it's rehearsal.
And there's a lot of band craft has got to be known at that stage as well. And unfortunately, young guys, for the learning, just learn it through experience. They've got to pick it up. Meanwhile, they're making mistakes. That's the difference between first and seventh or whatever. I've really got to get a wee short paragraph in from you here, Bruce, about current situation in Nova Scotia. What are you doing there?
Right now, living in Nova Scotia, currently, I teach full-time at a place called the Halifax Citadel, and for a group called the Halifax Citadel Regimental Association, and it's a living history museum dedicated to the time 1869 to 1871, when the 78th Highlanders were stationed there in the British Army. Through having a band on parade with the Living History Museum, a school of piping was developed in 1997, and I've been leading the instruction team since 2000 there. So that has a grade 1, 3, and 5 band. The grade 1 band is going strong. We just didn't happen to have the time, money, and funds to come over to the Worlds right now, but it's a good, powerful program, teaching a lot of kids there.
Oh, it's going great in Nova Scotia, eh?
Always has been.
Listen, just before I forget, in the intro we mentioned the word foundation. Tell me about your foundation.
That's a project that started in the spring of this year, very close and very emotional to me. I've been blessed with great teaching all my life, and an endless amount of trips to Scotland to compete and play, perform, compose, lecture, and learn. And I got to thinking, I missed a school in January this year due to illness, and I received tremendous support from a lot of people who were told not to call me. They said, forget it, I want to call them. And speaking to my wife, I said, they're not just, quote, clients, students, they're really good friends, and I need to do something now. I've had a great run. I don't want to say had, because I'm not done, but I'm still having a great run. But it just felt, what can I do to give back for these people? And I've had students who have been given opportunity to play at places that actually haven't been able to do it, mostly financially. Halifax is quite a distance from anywhere, and everything costs a lot of money. And it's not just based on Halifax, but it's going to be locally, provincially, nationally, and hopefully internationally, where it's called the Bruce Gandy Bagpiping Development Society right now. The word society is a word that has to be in by Canadian law. Until we have a certain amount of money, quite a large amount raised, that it can officially become the Bruce Gandy Foundation, and it's going to be for learning. And I just felt I can teach and I can help, but if we can raise money to help some of these kids go to piping schools or help them get to a certain prestigious competition to play at, deserving, not just kids, but mostly kids at first, other deserving adult players, whoever meets the criteria. I've got a great board of directors with me spread across Canada, of people I have key skills and passionate towards this project, whether it's accounting, marketing, or other top pipers to help me out. And the first big fundraiser is a CD that I've put together that's just finishing being mastered right now. That's going to be a series. It's going to be 5 or 6 Pipers'Persuasion on there, and they're all actual live performances of myself playing, which means it's not me recording them in my kitchen and saying, oh, this is what I sounded like here. It's the actual performance from the venue, be it Inverness, the Glenfiddich, the gold
Very
medal.
interesting.
And as much from just saying, it's not a tuition CD by any means. That's what I first want people to know. It's not just how Bruce plays it. It's to bring you, and the liner notes will show that, it's to bring you into that seat, into that venue that day, and tell the people that at the Glenfiddich on this day, I was given this tune to play, I was taught this tune by so-and-so, maybe some liner notes, referral notes to what I might be doing in the tune that's different, or why I'm doing it, and what that day at the Glenfiddich is like, or the gold medal at Oban or Inverness, or at Maxville, or the U.S. Piping Foundation's big prestigious events, and what goes through my head on that day when I'm playing said tune, just to bring the audience into this very chair here to take you back to that place. And a lot of the money of that project is going to be directed as to raise funds for this foundation. It's something that I really, really want to do, and it's really, you know, if I talk to the right sort of psychologist, they would probably say that it's one of the catalysts for why I've had such a tremendous, successfully solo year, because I've really created a new outlook since March, and I've gone.
It's given you a fresh appetite.
Absolutely, I've gone in a new direction. I'm loving it, and it's easy to ask for money because it's not for me. So at the piping schools and workshops I've been in, I've been quite emotional almost in telling people what this is about, and the response so far has been great. How can we help? And I'm like, the government of Canada gives me the license here to open the corporation, which I'll be doing probably Thursday when I get home to Canada. Then the ball is going to be officially rolling, and it's something that, I mean, I don't know if I have 1, 2, or 20 years left, but I've got this forever now, and to pass on to my son Alex.
And piping in Canada is thriving.
Yeah.
And doing very, very well in a very high standard. Thanks to you, Bruce, and all your contemporaries over there. Thanks very much for being here with the Piper's Persuasion.
My pleasure.
This midday. I don't know if it's afternoon or not. I've completely lost all track of time because I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I hope we can do it again sometime, because it's wonderful for the viewer, for you to pass on all this knowledge and experience. Thanks very much again.
Thank you.